This video explores 10 things that cost less than a shilling in 1960 Britain. If this brings back memories, please let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more nostalgic journeys through British history. #10 things that cost less than a shilling in 1960s Britain Part 1. Picture yourself standing outside a British corner shop in 1964, clutching a single shilling in your palm. That one coin, worth 12 old pence, could buy you more than you might imagine today. Before decimalization changed everything in 1971, a shilling was real money. You could feel its weight, see the English or Scottish lion on its face, and know you had genuine spending power in your pocket. Let's step back to those days when a shilling really meant something. When you could pop down to your local shop with just that one coin and walk out with your arms full. A packet of 10 Woodbine cigarettes would set you back exactly 11 pence in the early 60s. That left you a penny change from your shilling. Woodbines were the working man's smoke, short and unfiltered, sold in their distinctive green packet. You'd see them everywhere, from building sites to factory floors. The stronger players' navy cut came in at the same price, whilst the slightly more upmarket senior service might cost you the full shilling. A loaf of fresh white bread from your local baker cost around 8 pence. The smell of bread baking in the morning was still a common feature of British high streets then. Most towns had several independent bakeries, not just supermarket chains. You could buy that loaf still warm and have 4pence left over. That's enough for a sweet treat to go with your afternoon tea. Speaking of tea, a quarter pound of loose leaf tea from Typhoo or Brook Bond would cost you about 9 pence. This was real tea, mind you, not the tea bags that were just becoming popular. Most British families still used a proper teapot with a knitted cosy. You'd spoon the leaves in, let them brew properly, and strain it through a tea strainer. None of this dunking a bag in a mug business that came later. A pint of milk on your doorstep, delivered fresh each morning by the milkman, cost just 4 pence. Those electric milk floats silently glided through streets before dawn. The milkman knew everyone on his round. He'd leave the bottles with their distinctive silver foil tops, and you'd sometimes find blue tits had peeked through for a drink. In winter, the milk would freeze and push the foil cap up like a little hat. You could buy 2 pints and still have change from your shilling. Fresh, full-fat milk in proper glass bottles that you'd rinse and leave out for collection. A copy of the Daily Mirror or Daily Express newspaper cost 3 pence. For that price, you got pages of news, sport, and entertainment. The papers were much thicker then, full of classified ads and proper journalism. You could buy your morning paper, read it cover to cover on your commute, and leave it on the train for the next person. That was just what you did. A bag of traditional boiled sweets from the local sweet shop weighed in at about 6 pence for a quarter pound. We're talking about proper sweets here, acid drops, pear drops, or humbugs, measured out by hand into a paper bag. Mrs. Johnson behind the counter would scoop them from the glass jars lining the shelves. The sherbet lemons and aniseed balls sat alongside liquors of sorts and toffees. Children would press their faces against the window, deciding how to spend their pocket money. A shilling could buy you quite a selection, and you'd make it last all week. The standard British postage stamp, the iconic red penny red's descendant, cost 3 pence for a standard letter. You could write to your aunt in Scotland, pop it in the red pillar box, and know it would arrive the next morning. The postal service was extraordinary then. 2 deliveries a day in many areas, and you could post a letter in London at breakfast time and have it delivered in Manchester by tea time. A copy of the Radio Times or TV Times magazine cost just 4 pence. These weren't just TV listings, they were proper reading material. The Radio Times had been going since 1923, a British institution. You plan your whole week's viewing around what you read in those pages. There were only 2 channels until BBC Two arrived in 1964, so the choices were manageable. A bus fare across town rarely exceeded 6pence. The old Ridermaster buses still had conductors who'd come round with their ticket machines. You'd hear that satisfying ding as they wound the handle and tore off your ticket. The buses ran on time, were clean, and you could hop on and off without worrying about contactless payment or exact change. The conductor knew the regulars, had a friendly word, and kept order upstairs where the smoker sat. These weren't expensive luxuries or special treats. These were everyday items that ordinary British families bought without a second thought. Your shilling went far because it had to. Working people earned modest wages, perhaps 10 or 12 pounds a week. But the cost of living matched those wages in ways that seem almost impossible now. #10 things that cost less than a shilling in 1960s Britain Part 2. Final item on our shilling shopping list brings us to something quintessentially British. A box of Swan Vista matches cost just 2p. These weren't any old matches, mind you. Swan Vestas were the nation's favourite, with their distinctive red and yellow box. Every household had several boxes scattered about. One by the cooker for lighting the gas, another by the fireplace, perhaps one in the shed. They were utterly reliable, striking first time with its sharp scratch and familiar sulphur smell that nobody minded back then. You'd find them in every pub, often with the landlord's compliments, sitting in ashtrays on every table. Smoking was so prevalent that not carrying matches seemed almost eccentric. For 2p, you got a box that would last weeks. Now, if we add up everything we've covered across both parts, you'll notice something remarkable. All 10 items together cost less than 6 shillings. That's half a crown in old money, or about 30p in today's decimal currency. Try buying those same items now and you'd need 40 or 50 pounds easily. A loaf of bread alone cost what 10 loaves cost then. It's not just inflation, it's a complete transformation of what money meant and how people lived. The shilling shops that dotted Britain's high streets made a virtue of that price point. Everything cost a shilling or less. You could browse with confidence, knowing nothing would break the bank. These weren't pound shops or discount stores in the modern sense. They were proper retailers offering genuine goods at prices that reflected simpler times. The overhead was lower, the supply chain shorter, and the expectations different. Nobody needed 50 varieties of the same product. Walking into a corner shop in 1965, you'd find perhaps 1 or 2 brands of each item, not the overwhelming choice we face today. The shopkeeper knew his stock, knew his customers, and kept prices keen because his reputation depended on it. Communities were smaller, more contained. If you overcharged, word spread quickly. You couldn't hide behind corporate policies or blame head office. The shop was often the owner's livelihood and legacy, sometimes passed through generations. Quality of goods was different too. That shilling's worth of sweets contained real sugar, not artificial sweeteners. The milk was full fat, rich, and creamy. The bread had 4 ingredients, not 40. The cigarettes, well, we know better about those now. But the point stands, what you bought was straightforward. You understood what you were paying for. The labels told you what was inside because there wasn't much to hide. Food standards were rigorous, but the products themselves were simpler. Packaging was minimal. Your sweets came in a paper bag, your bread in a wax wrapper if you were lucky, often just in your shopping bag. Milk came in reusable bottles. Nothing was triple wrapped in plastic. This wasn't environmental consciousness, it was simple economics. Packaging cost money, and keeping prices under a shilling meant cutting unnecessary frills. The result was less waste, though nobody called it sustainability. British manufacturing still thrived. Those matches were made in Liverpool. The bread flour came from East Anglia. The tea might have grown in India or Ceylon, but it was packed in British factories by British workers. The milk came from local farms you could probably name. Supply chains were shorter, more personal. The milkman knew the farmer. The baker knew the flour mill. This connection kept prices honest and quality consistent. When something went wrong, you knew exactly who to talk to. Entertainment remained affordable too. A seat in the local cinema's gods, the cheap seats right at the back, cost about 9p. You could watch the latest film, sit through the interval, and buy a small bag of sweets, all for under 2 shillings. The Odeon and ABC cinemas dominated, but independent picture houses still operated in most towns. They showed films weeks after the main release, keeping prices even lower. Saturday morning pictures for children cost 6p, and every kid went. Life wasn't easier then, don't misunderstand. People worked hard, often in physically demanding jobs, for modest pay. Homes were colder, healthcare less advanced, and opportunities more limited. But there was a different relationship with money. A shilling felt substantial because it was. You could see it, feel its weight, hear it clink in your pocket. When you spent it, you knew exactly what you'd given up and what you'd gained in return. Money was tangible. Decimalization in 1971 changed everything. The shilling became 5 new pence, and somehow money felt lighter, less real. Prices crept up during the confusion. What cost 11p suddenly cost 6p, which sounds cheaper until you remember the conversion. The supermarkets had been growing throughout the 60s, but they accelerated afterwards. The small shops, the ones where everything cost less than a shilling, began disappearing. Progress, they called it. Efficiency. Looking back now, that shilling seems almost magical. A single coin that could buy you breakfast, your newspaper, your bus fare to work, and still leave you change. Those days are gone, transformed by inflation, technology, and changing expectations. But the memories remain. The smell of fresh bread, the clink of milk bottles, the friendly conductor on the bus, the shopkeeper who knew your name. These weren't just cheaper times, they were different times. And sometimes, just sometimes, different felt better.